Good morning. I'm Phoebe Harms for Ethics News, reporting to you live from Ithaca College in Ithaca, New York, with breaking news. Today's overarching question is, how do broadcast journalists keep people watching without altering their message? We spoke with some local sources, as well as New York Times media journalist Jonah Kessel, to give Ethics News the inside scoop.
I do know that it kind of affects people in two ways. First of all, me behind the camera, a camera between me and the subject. So I can talk about really difficult things if there's a camera between me, and I can photograph difficult things, and I have. And I have pretty much grown accustomed to it and feel like it's a security blanket. On the other side of the camera, it can have the opposite effect, where people feel even less protected. Vulnerable people are more vulnerable. People get invited just by the presence of a camera. We're always kind of talking about, okay, how can we be authentic? How can we show that I know that our presence there is, actually going to change that? So we have a constant conversation going on around, okay, what is the best camera to bring into a scenario to create authenticity to the scenario where technology is impeding that, and what is the scenario where technology can help that?
I mean, globally it varies, but the problem is that there's an underlying problem with broadcast journalism, which is to say that the media ownership decides and defines the content and how it is constructed and passed on to millions of viewers. So obviously, broadcast journalism is kind of under threat. I mean, there's a Foxization, I would call, of broadcast journalism across the globe, because sensationalism gets you ratings and advertisements, attacking people, even peddling half-truths, and saying things which are not always in public interest kind of get you those profits. So I think that's the biggest threat that we face.
Of course, just like video journalism, just like print, you need to be honest, you need to show the truth, even if it is something that you don't agree with.
How do people interact with the camera? Do individuals change their behavior when they know they're being recorded? We try to answer that in the field with Ethics News.
Sometimes when I'm filming, people react differently to the camera. Most times it's just because they're a little bit camera shy, so they'll feel a little bit uncomfortable. And if someone's not comfortable with me filming them, I usually try to make sure that I ask. If they're not okay with it, I won't, of course.
Just in understanding how subjects feel when they're being filmed, how their answers might change. Sometimes it can make people excited and they want to tell their story and they're really excited that someone's paying attention to them. Other times people get totally scared and kind of zip up. I can't tell you how many times in my life that I have done a pre-interview, which is normally how every one of my subjects, if you see them in films, I've already talked to them for many hours before we actually film. But many times we do a pre-interview, usually it's over the phone, then we person, and then we go and film. And sometimes somebody is super vibrant and emotional and very talkative before, and then we become very aware of it. And they might become less emotional. They might kind of watch what they say more, and they start kind of having this other side to their head where they're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't be doing this, or how am I going to appear? So I think you can show somebody that you're listening. That in itself will create like the basis for good communication, and that should help when you do turn on the camera, when the camera is there, to help them relax a little bit.
Back in the studio, we still have questions about the psychological effects in play. Why does the camera make people feel unnatural? How does that affect viewers at home?
I mean, studies have shown it. I mean, more and more studies and research have shown it. If you that how subtle messaging, framing, a visualization of certain issues affects the common mind, or even in millions. So a lot of ideas that we imbibe from mainstream media, we actually don't believe in them, but the media makes us believe into that this is good, or this is bad, this is preferred. So beyond the politics, how should we look? If you're not, if I as a man do not have six-pack abs and I'm not toned, and I'll feel insecure. So a lot of ideas that we imbibe from mainstream media, we actually don't believe in them, but the media makes us believe.
A lot of times you have to think about motivation. Why are people talking? What is their motivation for talking? And so trying to get attention to their issue, and they feel very passionate about that issue, and they know by speaking to me that their issue will get more attention, and their issue will get more attention, and maybe they can get more funding. That's probably their motivation for speaking. A philosopher in England at some point was like, is to reconstruct the architecture where there'll be a central watch tower. That watchman can see all of the prisoners from the central monitoring spot. The prisoners won't know that they're actually being watched, but they will know that they could be being watched. And if they know they might be being watched, they will act better. They will behave. And so now we're moving into this world where we're putting cameras everywhere and people kind of know it. And so people start regulating their behavior and changing what they're doing because they know they might be being filmed. We're creating a digital panopticon where everything we do is potentially being filmed, and then we're all kind of changing our behavior. And we need to ask ourselves if that's a good thing or not.
Context is a key factor to answering these questions. So how does the way we edit and frame stories impact viewers? Back to you in the field.
I think the other important larger issues that are framing. How are you framing your discussion? Is it favoring a particular point of view, a particular ideology, or not? Is your bias, because we all have biases, let's face it, is your bias really overt or covert? You can't eliminate bias, but you can work towards minimizing it so that you at least appear detached as far as possible. Your questions need to be really specific, free of the intro and the unnecessary detail, and they need to respond or to the news cycle more visibly than print, because in print you can go into the context, the history, the background, but for broadcast you need to be really locked into the news cycle and trying to seek one clear response on a very specific question, not 3 questions locked in one question, right?
I think just the whole point of video journalism is to capture what was going on in a way that you can't describe with words. So just to really set the scene for people and be honest and truthful about what was happening at the event that you were covering. So that means wide shots, medium close-ups, like it means a variety of shots that tell the story that, are intimate, but also not so much intimate, so that people can see and make choices for themselves about how they want to feel about whatever video you're making.
I remember I did this story a couple years ago about rabbit heads, and like rabbit heads are a delicacy in China. People like to eat them. And I made this video about it, and it was like an assignment. I didn't choose to do it. And then I gave the food editor the video, and they were like, "This is disgusting." And I was like, "That's what it looks like, like this is reality. I think we should show it." They were like, "No, this is too graphic." And so then they you trade out clips to things that are maybe not quite as graphic. And maybe it's in the context of the food section. Maybe people don't want to be grossed out by dead rabbit heads. It's really about how do we, especially because a lot of these things I do, it's like analysis where I'm taking things, and sometimes that means taking a piece of information from over here, another piece of information over here, and putting them together to create context that would otherwise be very hard to see. And that, in some ways, a point of privilege for me, that I'm able, okay, hold on, how do we tell this complicated story? Can we analyze this so it means something more to people? We don't set up anything up. We don't tell subjects interview questions in advance. There's basic journalistic principles which apply to, at the same time, there's scenarios where I have to illustrate something and there is no obvious visual. Sometimes these pieces are very much explanatory, where our voice is helping to explain things. And in that context, sometimes we have to make illustrative visuals.
Does editing play a large role in viewer perception? Are viewers the most important factor when making content decisions?
I filmed a piece in Cuba this year related to the sonic attacks, or the alleged sonic attacks, I'll use air quotes. And I knew we were creating a mystery and we were following like a trail that was leading us in like crazy places of lots of different rumors, and we were having trouble finding actual facts. And through the camera, we knew we were going to have to use a lot of kind of B-roll. I decided to bring a lot of tilt shift lenses, where I'm kind of changing the focus plane in camera. And so a lot of the images, I'm trying to create like a feeling of like uncertainty and mystery, crucial technology. Part of that has to do with being honest and having your root mission and facts, right? Like that's like at the end of the day, like that's what we're doing. We're giving facts to people. If they're not interesting to watch and consumable, no one's going to watch your facts. So it doesn't matter. So it's not that simple.
With editing, you have a lot of power to, control how people see whatever happened. Everybody that writes pieces and edits videos, they all have the same amount of power to, to tell a story. Storytelling is powerful, and as journalists, like, we have the opportunity to, be unbiased and like show the truth and let people make their own decisions. I try to make my videos interesting as possible. That's just because I want people to be interested in the content that I make. I wouldn't do it in a deceiving way to like make it seem like, for example, like portraying a crowd that looks like, that is actually in reality small, but making it look very big by just doing like close-up shots to not really like accurately portray the size or something. I would not do something like that.
There's time for drama and there's not. And I think the thing is, you have to really understand your story and even the information you're not going to publish. Like, you have to have this greater understanding of something to be able to understand what is dramatic. And in the documentary sense, it's like this weird combination of being totally hands-off but being very aware of everything. But we can build drama in much more easily into an edit in post, because it's being combined with all these other assets. We can control time, we can control the audio environment, we can control music. It's pretty hard to kind of factor in the reality of how people consume our media. But a lot of it happens in the edit where we're like, okay, like this thing I'm editing right now, I put out a really fat cut, like as big as it could be, and it came out at 45 minutes. It's going to come down to about 12. And so I know that by cutting and cutting and cutting and cutting, I'm trying to get to the root of the message, try to make it so people finish it. We value engagement over views. And so I know if someone has 75% through my piece, that I feel like I've done actually a good job. If I can get like a 75% completion rate, that's very good.
Once again, I'm Phoebe Harms for Ethics News. Let's head over to Alexis Davis for your Central New York weather.